Hello, Professor Cooper. I'm Nicholas Hinton back again for the last video for the second reluctant learner. For the sake of this video, I will call this particular student Ivy. This is the second learner. I will go through the questions, share in a written scenario the particular class, work, lesson, unit, or skill being taught, and give a sense of how the reluctant learner fits into the overall dynamic of the classroom. So this is another classroom in which I co-taught, which was a geometry class. This is also a sophomore student. The student is a diverse learner. There was about 6 diverse learners in the class at this time. Out of 34 kids, there were 6 diverse learners, about 6 students who were English language learners. And so that's how he fits in the class overall. Much of what they were learning were solving linear equations and multi-step equations and multi-step problems, and those are the issues for this particular student. Let's talk about like the interesting facts, right? The student would sit next to. We think that a lot of the strategies that really help kids are helpful. Sometimes are not as helpful. Small group interactions and small group cases for this particular student was not successful. It was not successful because this particular student would copy other students who he was with. And the minute you removed him away from the strong support or support of anyone, period, you begin to really see that this student was struggling. In the midst of teaching them multi-step equations, I was able to really see as we gave them assessments, me and the lead teacher gave assessments, we began to really see what the problem was with the student. So like I said, overall, he fit into this class as a general education class, as a push-in, as a diverse learner whose math scores are not really that high, neither whose his reading scores are not that high. Who were below average and scored in the lower percentiles when it came to testing. The second question asks, identify, using textual research and classwork, what might be the cause of reluctance. So the reluctance occurred once I separated him from those small group people and individuals. Those that were around him were no longer strong, or for some instance he did not talk to, he was friendly with, and they did not give him the answers. And so we begin to see a drastic drop in grade. We begin to see a drastic drop, and because we saw a drastic drop in grade, we begin to see a drastic drop in his like he was more reluctant of really joining the lesson because he felt that he wasn't adequate. And that's it. That's simply what it is that the student did not feel adequate enough, and that the student did not feel that they were good enough, or the underlying problem was really, the student, to some extent, in his own mind, didn't feel normal. And, for lack of better words, the student did not feel normal. The student felt that there was a lot of help that he needed. And so, therefore, he really didn't find himself in a space of where he ever got comfortable with the class. Another issue that arose, a thing that caused this was understanding diagnosis, was simply observing him in groups. The rationale and observable data and understanding was when he was with other children who were strong, not even strong, with other students that he was friendly with, or students that he talked to, or when he would sit in small groups, he did successfully well. He'd get A's and B's. But the minute we separated him and we allowed him to do the same work by himself, was the minute that he could not even complete anything and get anything done. And so the behavior was seeing the student go from an A to close to a D or F once separated from the groups, because of students were talking. And we know from the understanding of development that right before the stage of high school, there's a stage that says that many students talk, and they find society as a way of their social atmosphere. So much of their social order is in talking and finding themselves before the world around them through talking and through socializing. And many of them socialize within the classroom. It's not just a talking thing, but it's a social thing. But as we move into this, understanding how the dynamic of where he was and how the fact that he didn't truly believe in himself He truly didn't believe that he was capable, and he was simply a reluctant learner because of such. Because he felt he did not have the skills to continue to learn. He did not feel he had the skills to continue to be successful. He did not feel he had the skills, so he would not try at all. The student began to really pull back, and the reasons why: learning problems. Another thing is, you know, he never had anger issues. He never had there was never really a true sense of him lacking attention. It just simply was he was there but didn't want to be, and he wasn't connected because of such. Another thing that I want to do from the researchers understand is that fear of failure. Right, this is sometimes not as often talked about. He was a diverse learner. He understood what he was. He understood what the challenges that he has with the curriculum and what he's have had since he was in the 4th grade. The challenges that he has had accessing curriculum, and so sometimes many individuals in this stance or this stature fail or fall below because of their inability to really reach and go beyond where they are and go beyond their disabilities or the diverse situations that they have, and they're afraid. There'd be times when I would come next to him and ask him questions or do follow-up assessments right next to him in the midst of the classes and stuff, and he could not answer them, and he did not want to answer them because he felt that he was going to fail, or he felt that he's going to give me the wrong answer, and with presenting me the wrong answer, and of course in our answer would help us understand why he was reluctant. He did not want to be, because he did not, number one, believe in his skills and his ability. He had learning problems, and simply it was difficult to keep pace with all of his peers, and the only way that he kept pace with all of his peers was simply by copying them. As we move to the next part, summarize your thinking in terms of how you discern how you might address the reluctance. What I felt was the reason why the way that I picked was simply is I looked at all of his work and I began to see that when he was next to people, as I said, he was able to get the stuff right because he was copying. And so the first thing I built on was simply the fact that understanding in Willingham research that students need familiar, so they need concrete examples to help them understand abstract ideas. Students need to develop knowledge to understand the abstract and the concrete to apply old knowledge to a new problem. So when we begin to solve or to understand solving linear equations or solving these different equations, these two-step problems, I'll give a perfect example. 5n equals 20. 5n equals 20. We know that n is equal to 4. How do we find that? We simply divide the 5. We leave the n on the left side. We leave the n by itself, and we divide the 5. We cancel it out, and then we take the 5 to the other side, and we divide the 20 by 5, and we get 4. So therefore, n is equal to 4. That was something like that was even hard and challenging for him. But what I began to do was that once I noticed that he was not able to understand, really math is about solving things, but it's steps to it. And so essentially, I wanted him to understand the steps to solving these problems. And so what I began to do was I began to embed based off of the article, the EdThink article, the 15 ways to engage reluctant learners. One thing that I liked, number 7, was the idea was embed intervention and enrichment. Every lesson should have a way for students to get help and they are struggling, in place they can go if they already mastered it. Confused students disengage. Bored students do the same. So what I did was begin to embed the interventions and enrichment in the curriculum. I began to allow the student to use task cards. I began to allow the students to create task cards. For diverse learners, and specifically for him, I gave him a task card where he just had to fill in some missing words or some missing points for him to make sure that he got the problem right. And the more and more he did better, the less and less words I added to the task card, and where he had to do it himself. He got a lot of practice on it, and with those task cards, it helped mediate the issues that he was having, particularly with math and particularly with solving the problems with his classmates. I began to really, like I said, take these concrete examples and really develop him a little bit more. I began to do around the classroom. I began to do gallery walks where students would look at different problems, and they would have to solve them on their own. And for him in particularly, I started when I'm scaled back and specifically started with allowing him to solve one-step problems first, getting him used to one-step problem, getting him writing the task cards to one-step problems. And once I felt that he was comfortable, and once he proved that he was comfortable within the intervention, we began to understand it. As we know, as we were reading the Wilhelm article, the Wilhelm article pretty much states that practice improves transfer, right? Practice protects you against forgetting. So not only were we understanding, bringing new ideas to the table and new understanding to the table, but building off of those old building blocks. He already knew how to multiply. He already knew how to add. He already knew how to divide. He already knew how to subtract. And so taking those building blocks, bringing it here, and allowing the practice to protect them, the practice of those also to protect him from not remembering, but also the practice improves transfer. The more he practiced, the more he began to develop, and the more he began to understand it, and the work and the logic and all of the understanding began to transfer to him, and he began to understand what was going on and how to move forward. Other strategies I used was just really simply small group pullouts where I monitored the students. Aside from what the teacher was doing, I monitored the students, doing a lot of reteach. Doing a lot of reteach, doing a lot of pre-teaching, allowing him to access vocabulary, giving him the vocab words for the day, or helping him understand what vocabulary means, because the more I begin to notice that I built his vocabulary understanding, and the more that I begin to notice that I begin to build what he knew and what he thought through vocabulary, it began to improve. So the task cards, guided notes, and really putting him in a space to allow him to encourage him, simply encouragement. Hey, you can do this, kid. You got this. You got this. I believe in you. I know that you can do it. Those were simply things that really helped. Were the interventions successful? Yes, they were successful in dual ways, right? They were successful because we begin to see an improvement. We begin to see his confidence go up. We begin to see him do a lot better. His baseline, what we had gathered, was there was nothing that he was doing because he couldn't do anything, so he would not do it. So he went from a baseline of a kid not trying to and not attempting to a kid trying and getting at least 50% of the problems right. Now, on the flip side of this, was the intervention successful? It was successful to get him engaged, but there was still some struggles with the academic content. And so what we did next was pretty much move him to a tier 2 intervention to help him make sure that he continues his progress and things of that nature. The length and the format of the case study will so that's pretty much it. I'm wrapping it up. This is Reluctant Learner number 2. Thank you, Professor Cooper. Thank you for all the content. It was really rich, and thank you for everything.